Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome to newcomers to the Facebook group and podcasts. We love hearing all the reasons why teachers across the world are joining. So much deep and creative literacy work going on in schools. Some of the recent comments we've had when people have signed up to join: from a pre-service teacher, I want to learn from teachers. Absolutely love the podcast. Thank you, whoever that was. To learn and to share. I want to expand my knowledge from other fellow dedicated educators. From a school leader, how to support writers who struggle with ideas. Very topical for today. We've got an author sitting here in the room with us, so we will be exploring a little bit about ideas. This one from the Netherlands. I'd like to learn about teaching literacy in your country, because I'm from the Netherlands. Love that you've joined. A literacy coach said, I would like to learn more about strategies and resources for middle school. And from a university teacher educator, I like to keep up with useful teaching ideas to pass on to practicing teachers. Just another teacher, ideas, resources on teaching literacy for primary school students and support for addressing issues that may rise in teaching literacy in the classroom. So if you're not a member of the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. But welcome to this podcast, episode number 82 in what's really season 3. It's been great. We've had 2 full years of podcasting, and today our podcast is called Latest Release Books with Mike Dumbleton, and we have a big welcome back to Mike, a distinguished author living right here in Adelaide, South Australia. Welcome back, Mike.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Oh, great to have. We love having the living, breathing writers in here.
It's nice that you're so close. It's just a quick trip in the car.
Yes. Although you've already got a Zoom across country, across the world
that's right.
tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about one of the books in a second, and I'm talking to some children in the UK this evening in a school there where someone got in contact that we know through family and asked if we could talk to them on World Book Day, I think it is in the UK. Yes. And so we're going to see if we can organise that.
Nice, isn't it?
That'll challenge all the technical skills to the limit, I think.
So I was really going to ask you what you've been up to lately, Mike. That's probably one of the things, sorting that out.
Yeah, well, I'm always doing some writing in one way or another. And I was going to do some writing yesterday, and I didn't get a lot done. But in another way I did, because I kept thinking about it. And sometimes you just have to work out where to start. And I find even that, if I'm doing some writing and then I put it aside for a while and get up and walk around, suddenly things just start to percolate in the back of your mind and ideas come together. So it's sort of worth putting things down or aside and coming back to them. So actually I started doing the writing from the thinking that came yesterday. The writing started today. So that's good. I read as well, a whole range of things, and go out, see some other writers, find out what they're doing, what material they've got on the way and what they've done and so on. That's always exciting to know. There's Writers' Week here next week, which could be busy, and there's the Fringe. Everything goes crazy in Adelaide at this time of the year.
Yeah.
So there are all those bits and pieces. So there's never short of things to do.
Fabulous. Mike, I'm going to ask, so is writing part of your everyday?
It is, yeah, it is. I say that it's sort of, I have a bit of time off. I don't do it intensively all the time. There are times when that happens for various reasons. A book gets close on a schedule and a publisher wants revisions or wants you to try something out with a manuscript, and you've got deadlines to do that. But I'm always pondering ideas, and you get ideas which seem fantastic at one stage, and then you start to work on them and they sort of fall apart. But I never put things aside completely. I sort of put them into a dormant file, and occasionally I go back and have a look through the dormant file and see if I can wake anything up there. See if the germ of an idea can be made into something that actually works.
Oh, I just can't help but think of all the things you've just referenced there about ideas. And we had that comment, didn't we, from someone about, how to support writers who struggle with ideas.
Yeah.
And I think right there and then is that idea, like you are thinking every day, whether it is on a particular idea or how an idea has got legs or how it could work.
Exactly, got legs. I think it's useful to write the idea down. And now, of course, I have technology with me. I can get my phone out and I can just dictate it into something before I tidy it up and put it into a particular file that's got ideas on. And as I say, some ideas take off, some don't. I think Roald Dahl or someone was asked, where do you get your ideas from? All writers are asked this question.
Yes.
But it's the answer that I remember. He said, I don't know. If I did, I'd go there more often. So it's a bit hit and miss. There isn't just one fountain or one well or one bottled drink that gives you ideas. You don't quite know where they come from. But generally speaking, I remember where the idea came from for particular books. You sort of remember, that's one idea that sort of got going. It might have stalled, but eventually it got there.
Yeah.
And then some of the ideas sit there and wait, and there are ideas that you don't seem to be able to work through. And it may be a number of years later, a lot of years later, when you finally find a way to sort of get that to work.
So maybe the question isn't so much about where do ideas come from, but catching ideas.
Catch the idea when it's there, yeah.
And
I
whether you sit with it or whether it's got the legs then. It's the catching the idea.
I try not to think of ideas when I'm asleep. Because it destroys your sleep patterns. That has happened a couple of times, and I've woken up and thought, I'll remember that. And then I've thought to myself, no, you won't. You won't remember that at all. Go and write it down. Yeah. And then it's a matter of creeping out the room, trying not to wake people up and all that kind of stuff, and writing it down. And then I can sleep. Otherwise, I just wriggle around thinking, I can't forget that.
Yes.
So sometimes you do have to get up and write it down. And today it's so easy. Just have a file that you can open up, put it in notes or something like that. And then you can come back to it.
Yes. I can clearly testify to that. Thinking that I was going to hold an idea, I went to sleep last night thinking, all right, I've got this idea for the another podcast I was recording. This morning, I went to sleep so happy thinking, right, I've got that now. Did not write it down, and then spent all of the morning going through all of the thought process of all yesterday, trying to find it again, and I haven't. Yep. So that is a key, isn't it?
Yeah, I find that particularly with things like word order. You've got a sentence that's being used and it's a bit clumsy, it's a bit clunky, it just doesn't quite work, and you can't get it right. And then you get up and you walk away and do something in the middle of shopping, suddenly something comes into your head. That's it. And I always record that quickly and get it down because you can't get it back again. It's and it's just the placement of words or a different word that works better. It's got a different weight or beat attached to it and stuff like that. So
great. Now we will come back to. We won't leave the ideas piece because actually, for each of the books that you've brought today, there will be talk about the idea is an important part, of course, of any process, or any book comes to life. But in the podcast today, what are we really wanting to have a look at? So, we always sort of talk about, well, when we're writing with students or, getting our students into and through that writing process, I think we all as teachers find there's always some struggle there. We've always got a lot of questions about how do we get there with that. And so the podcast today, we are certainly hoping I'm asking the right questions to get some of those good insights from Mike and for Mike to be ready to, think about what are the insights, because not only do you write, but you work with students in schools too, and you get to see, and with teachers. And so as teachers, I think we're always searching too for great books to use in our teaching. not only to support them in their reading and their writing, but in their understanding of the world.
That's true.
So,
Yep.
so it's a bigger piece than just, without a doubt. Like, the important thing is that students have this opportunity to feel like they are sitting with an author when they have got a book
Yep.
in their hands, that they have this experience and that they can recognise well-crafted writing and discover what the author is doing that makes the writing good, and explore it and try it out in their own writing. And I think that's one of the things that, that's why we bring great writers in like you, Mike, because it's the well-crafted, it's the thought, it's the
time and energy that goes into it and the processes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's, well, perhaps I could... we've got Anissa's alphabet in front of us here.
Yes.
And this, I've probably mentioned it before. It came out a couple of years ago, but the paperback version of the book is coming out, I think it's June sometime, in time for Refugee Week.
So in 2023?
Yes, yeah. So that's great news. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And it's done well. It was a notable book with the Children's Book Council here, but it was also... it was designated as a White Raven book, which is an international award by a committee in Munich that chose 6 Australian books. They chose books from other countries, but they chose 6 from Australia that were seen to be significant works on universal themes and well executed and all the usual things, but it just gave it that recognition. And this took in books from picture books through to young adult books as well. So there are a lot of people producing work in that area. And I was very pleased. We had a big launch here with 300 people, and the governor at the time of South Australia was there, who was himself a refugee. And that's the topic. Anissa's Alphabet is a book about refugees, and it has... it has all the seriousness that goes with it. And in fact, it must have turned up at a school in England, because that's what they contacted me about and said, could you talk to the kids about the book and so on, which I'm very willing to do.
Yeah.
But it's a book that when you see the word alphabet on the front, you're thinking of children who are just learning the language, and A is for apple, B is for ball, that kind of stuff. And this is nothing like that whatsoever. This is a book that I remember I had some refugee students in one of my classes a long time ago, and they'd seen awful things happening in front of them. They'd experienced the trials and tribulations of trying to get to a different country, facing the fact that you may not make it, or that certain members of your family or your group may not make it. So if I just read a couple of pages from it, and the illustrations are by Hannah Somerville, who did a fantastic job with the illustrations. They really are fantastic. A is for Anissa Aliduran. B is for bombs, when the fighting began. C is for carrying all that we can. And you can hear straight away that when B is for bombs, you're on a different subject. That sobers people up straight away if anyone's listening to it and they've got a misconception. And when it says carrying all that we can, it's got 12 small pictures there which show different things they're picking up. And there's some photos. Food is there, water is there. There's a photo of Anissa releasing the pet bird that she had, some warm clothes, all of those essential things, and nothing of the frivolous things that people say they may take with them. These are essentials. D is for danger, from which we ran. E is for endlessly having to hide. F is for fear, always inside. So there's a lot to take in. And when I wrote it, I actually started a long time ago, and I did something. I was writing in prose to start with, and it just didn't have the impact. It didn't have the feel and so on. And then I changed to doing the rhyming. And the thing about the rhyme is that it's difficult to write things in rhyme if you're also following the alphabet, A, B, C, and you can't change the order around. It's increasingly difficult. And I was quite pleased with the way that I got through A, B, C, D, E, F. But in the back of my mind, I know that X, Y, Z are lurking at the end of the alphabet. And it took a long time to really smooth it out, get the clunkiness out of it, and still make it relevant without it seeming forced. Now, as a book, just a couple of things to ponder here. I was talking to a group the other day and found that one of the ways that you can bring students into the book, I think they come in, they recognize the seriousness of the issues, but I talk about the cover. And there were actually several covers we looked at to start with. Hannah was brilliant with that, producing things that we looked at, and we talked about them. And there were some where Anissa was on the cover but wasn't so clearly visible, or there were some where Anissa was partly visible and other people were partly visible as well. And we decided to go with one that showed Anissa looking over the side of a boat, and alongside her you have the back of other people's heads who are sort of huddled in to the trauma that faces them, the trauma they're going through, while she's looking out towards the reader. So you see her face. And it says Anissa's alphabet, and we know it's about refugees, but the concept of refugees is in front of us day in, day out. And it's not necessarily restricted to war situations. And around about the time that the book came out, we had massive fires here in Australia. And there were people who were refugees from their own homes. And the fire was such that people were forced down to the beaches, and ships were sent in, boats and ships were sent in to evacuate them from the beaches. In fact, the illustrator lived very close to this, and the fire came up and I think singed the back fence of her house. So there was talk about whether she could get to the launch or not because of what was going on. And more recently, we've had the evacuations and the floods. So you've had people who've been refugees from their homes and their communities as a result of those things. So then one of the things at one of the presentations I did was I said to the kids, well, it says Anissa's alphabet, but my name's Mike. It could be Mike's alphabet if I'd been in a situation that's like this. It could be your alphabet. Let's try this. I went on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. You all call out your name. If it's me, I yell out Mike. If you're Pauline, you yell out Pauline. Whatever it is, just yell it out. Grandparents as well, don't sit there thinking you don't have to do anything. It's so we got everyone calling out 1, 2, 3, and suddenly they're all yelling. I can't understand it because it's all different names, but they've all yelled out their name. I said, well, so when I read this book, you need to be inside the shoes, inside the boat, inside the cover. We'll think of it as your alphabet, and that's how you get that sort of connection to it. So, and people have told me they find it it affects them. It gets to them, and it doesn't have a happy ever after ending. We're left not quite knowing. Things are in limbo. Isn't that the case with refugees very often anyhow? When things seem almost to be resolved, they're still in limbo because they're between these two worlds where things happen so fast it's impossible to take it all in.
Yes, and I think that's where the book really lets readers do the processing around that if I am in that situation, whether from fire or flood, or that even if it isn't at a point of resolution yet, that if it isn't at the end, that actually I'm in it and I'm living it. I'm not necessarily through it, but it is a universal feeling that in this situation I have a whole world of people who in some way can understand what this feels like in whatever their situation has been. And I think that's what's so powerful. If we ask students like you do to put themselves, wear these shoes, be the person in this story, to actually feel what this is like if we were in it.
Well, there's a whole story in the pictures that's not in the words. Mum is mentioned, but Dad is not mentioned. But Dad is there for part of the story. There's a grandmother there who's there for part of the story and so on. And so one of the exercises, this is not my idea, this goes down, I can't name the school, but one of Hannah's children, it may be both of them, the school that they went to, I think, I may have made some slight errors here, but it's very close to Hannah and her family. The teacher got the book and she actually got the students to write a narrative version, a prose version of the poem, to unpack the poem, to look at the pictures closely and see all the things. I mean, there's a page in front of me now that says, I is for imagining life elsewhere. That's what it says. But the picture shows a young girl in a refugee camp with the tents and other people around, and the mother trying to cook some food, and she's carrying some water because you haven't got taps and all those kinds of things. All those details are there. They're not said. They're in the pictures. We discussed all of the pictures as Hannah completed them and so on, looked at alternatives and where to move things and stuff like that. But if you start to write it as a prose version, there's lots that you can draw out. And I was sent a couple of the stories, and they were fabulous. They were really good. So I think that's a great exercise to transpose it. That shows that kids have got the concepts, they've got the ideas, and also Hannah takes some of her drawing things with her. You see inside the child's mind from her drawings of hoping that some magical beast can swoop in and just take them all to safety on its back and things like that. There are 3 drawings by Hannah in there, by Anissa in there. They're actually drawings by Hannah,
yes,
the illustrator.
Yeah.
And just on an incidental, she used her son Digby did some drawings. She got some kids to do some drawings so she could sort of get a sense of what the drawings would be like at that age. And some of them are very close to some of those drawings that they did. So we're all, when you say, where do you go for ideas? I can't believe the job that Hannah did was phenomenal, because she just gets my lines of poetry and just the words, and then just builds this whole world around it. So
yes.
So it's very much a collaborative thing, lots of discussion, lots of thought, and much appreciated by me.
I really like that, allowing children to, in a sense, through that prose writing that they did in response to that, it is about having a response. Being given the honour of, what is this story for me? Yep. So being able to do that, I think, is a great way of not only honouring Anissa's story or me in that story, but what that means to us. And, if we want to be very dry and say, well, where does that link to the Australian curriculum? Then it's all about that having preferences and responding to and looking at. I think the term that the Australian curriculum uses is examining literature, looking at, looking at
seeing
this
beneath the surface.
Yes.
And, making the connections, working out how the mind's working.
Yes.
The pictures that are there and so on. So I think there's lots and lots that can be drawn from that.
Yes. And that's where, well-crafted years.
Years. I spent quite a time. I actually had a student when I was working on this. He was a refugee student, and I asked him about several things in the book, and then he came to see me about 3 or 4 weeks later. I said, have you finished the book? Is the book out yet? I said, it takes a bit longer than that. I've got up to G, but I still haven't got the worst bits sorted out yet. So it took a long time. And I've always been a full-time educator, so sometimes things just get put aside for a while you sort the rest of your life out. Do the assessments and the reports and parent meetings.
Exactly. And I think that's something, that strand on the curriculum. Literature is there for a purpose. It is about being able to work with high quality literature, to be able to do that examining and thinking and building ideas, because of, I think we as reader then can really honour the work the writer and in this instance the illustrator have brought together. Lots of research, lots of choosing the right words, lots of getting those sentences into powerful, sounding right, feeling right, lots of putting that punctuation in the exact right spot get the meaning that we're after.
And there are similar stories that students can write based in the sort of flooding situation or the fire situation of people moving out, which includes people and animals usually in those situations. You can develop your own stories around that.
All right, so Anissa's Alphabet, in the show notes, all of the books will be listed so that you can easily chase those up. The next 3 that we're going to have a look at are all new.
Well, this one, I haven't spoken about this one before. This one came out 2021, I think the next one I'm going to
still
talk about,
pretty
and the
new.
other two haven't come out yet. Actually, I've got some
Ooh.
advanced copies, but they're out in April.
Beautiful.
And the one I'm going to look at next is it's a long way from the Anissa story. This is a parody of Mary Had a Little Lamb, and once again that opens up the ability to do parodies or different versions, modern versions of any number of nursery rhymes and familiar poems and stuff like that you can recast. And there are lots of examples of that kind of thing. It's called Mary Had a Monster Saw, and the first lines go like this, so you can get the context very, very quickly. It was an English illustrator, this one. It's Mary had a dinosaur called Monstersaurus Rex, not the cuddly little lamb that everyone expects. She found him in a long-lost hole behind the garden shed. He'd been there 60 million years, at least. That's what he said. So we're in the sort of nonsense area, the fictitious, the imaginative area of kids' literature, and you can take some liberties. I got through the business of it wasn't the usual story, and then that line, he'd been there 60 million years, because that's about the time that the dinosaurs were here and so on. Yeah. And then at least that's what he said. I thought, yeah, well, that's well over the top. The dinosaur comes out, he's talking, he's been behind the garden shed for 60 years. If you, that's a willing suspension of disbelief right there, which is a basis for a lot of literature. You just got to go with it. Yeah. And there were other echoes of the Mary rhyme. Sometimes I get the kids to say the first bit of the rhyme to sort of resurrect it in their minds. You have to be careful. There's a song version as well, which is different from the traditional one that I know. The wording is slightly different, so I take my wording with me sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
And then
that's actually a good point, Mike. You know that, and this is good insight for us to know, because there are often parodies on things.
Yeah,
but then we don't know which one that's the parody of.
That's right.
And I think particularly with nursery rhymes and fairy tales, that's an area where teachers tell me, and I've also discovered, that there is, all right, what version was that the parody of? And did we even know the original version of it? Sometimes we're looking at parodies of parodies.
Well, I don't want to get into trouble for this, but it's Sesame Street is one of those things that did a lot of parodying of various things, but I wasn't sure that kids knew the originals.
Yes.
The parody came before the original in some cases, where in this case you can, with these things, get the original there, so you can look at that and say, well, here's an author who looked at that and thought, I'm going to change that up a bit.
Yes.
And there's an immediate chance for kids to do the same thing, to choose something they think they can write differently and present in a more modern way and so on.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt here, but back to the old, curriculum again, because this is actually an area, so in the creating literature part of the Australian curriculum, this is exactly where this sits, where we are experimenting and adapting narratives that we have experienced or that we've read or that we know. And so it is for our youngest ones, for our 5-year-olds, we might change the character. We might change and we play around with, but I love that they use those words experiment and adapt, because I think that's what we should be doing. We're having a play, having a play with that, but it is coming at it from what are we playing with? Where do we start with that that we can?
I think the students enjoy doing that because it's it's subversive. It just does those things. And this touches little lines in the Mary thing. The moment he saw Mary, his smile began to grow. And everywhere that Mary went, the dinosaur would go. You can't see this, but the dinosaur has found, you can see that there's a female toilet logo there, where the dinosaur is in the wrong place, basically, and needs to move out because you can't follow her into the toilets. And so when he gets to school, when Monster went to Mary's school, he caused a real fuss by stepping on the fences and sitting on the bus. So there's a whole range of things where a dinosaur in school is very different from the little lamb.
Yes.
And to be honest, in the original, I don't think the little lamb even got inside. Whereas the dinosaur got inside on top, trampled it to bits, broke the climbing frame, and so on. So I won't tell you where it goes in the end, but you can see how it lends itself to adaptation, to transposing into a different form.
Yeah, and that's a good one for teachers to connect with that part of the curriculum around that of, what can be fun for adapting, experimenting with, and, because some stories are actually way too hard to do that with. That's just not...
That's true.
Yes.
It's also got a... Montresor becomes a bit of a legend in some ways. Cameras arrive and the TV crews get there, and he ends up putting some pictures online and getting 1 million views and stuff like that. So the modern elements are there. So it's definitely not traditional. It's not the country schoolhouse around the paddocks and so on. It's a very different situation.
Yes.
But no spoilers for the ending. You can see some of the ingredients, and once again, those things will give kids different ideas. But they can go to Humpty Dumpty and range of different nursery rhymes. Little Miss Muffet. There's Incy Wincy Spider. Spiders can take off and cause an awful lot of trouble. So there are a lot of places that they can go.
Yes,
So.
yes. And lots of, having something to work with. And I like that. So if we were coming back to the ideas piece, there's an idea that we've got somewhere to take.
Yes.
We can take it somewhere.
You've got a starting point.
Yes.
It's not that just that the blank paper.
Correct.
So that's always tricky. Well, from my point of view, it's good because I myself went back to the original and looked and so what happened here? And the school everywhere that Mary went. So there are lines that echo lines in the original, and then it just takes it a bit further, just moves a bit further away.
Oh, there's a nice term you've just used. I like that. Echo lines. Lines that we've heard before, or even the rhythm.
Yes,
I guess,
the rhythms
of a line
that's right.
that we can echo.
Yes,
I really love that as a term.
Yep.
All right. Heard it first here with Mike Dumbleton. All right. Now, Mike, the next 2 books we're going to talk about, as you said, are new releases.
Yep.
So here in March of 2023, they are not yet out in the world, but this will be wonderful to hear about. You've brought 4 very different books, and I can't wait to hear more about this first one.
And that's a good thing. I mean, that's another curriculum issue in so much as when you get the kids writing, you want them doing different things. You don't want them doing the same thing. To switch from something serious to something that's comical, to something that's personal, and all those kinds of things is always good. Now the next book, it was actually done by myself and my wife Linda. So it's a Mike and Linda Dumbleton book, the first one. And there are another couple coming out, and one next year. This one's called Let the Singing Begin, and it's actually aimed at an early audience, but for a particular reason. It's published by a publisher called Little Book Press that's part of Raising Literacy Australia. And the books, they're available normally as a commercial product, but they go out in book packs free books for kids to read prior to getting to school sometimes here, and there are about 23,000 copies of each book go out, so there are quite a few around the place. But this first one looked at an idea that came up from some research from Flinders University, and they were looking at, don't ask me why they settled on this, but they were looking at the fairy wren and what happened when the fairy wren laid its eggs and the eggs hatched and all that kind of thing. And they discovered that the fairy wren sings to the eggs. So this is a little bit like saying to mums that you can actually sing and talk to your baby while the baby's in the womb. And there are studies to show there are responses from babies in the womb. It says this inside the cover. Fairy wrens make special calls in the later stages of sitting on their eggs. These calls are then imitated by the chicks once they're hatched. So they hatch singing the song that mum was singing to them when they were in the eggs. And they've actually done some experiments to prove this because they've put some eggs that weren't the mum's eggs in there. A different bird has come out, couldn't sing the song, and the mum wouldn't recognize the chick. So there's definitely something going on there. Similarly, learning can take place when a mother interacts with her unborn child. So let the talking and singing begin. And
Great
so
title.
so begins. The title sort of we struggled with that for a little while, and then it sort of found itself really because you just knew. So the illustrations, I have to say something about that, were done by Mandy Foote, who's a South Australian illustrator, and they're fabulous. And she did lots of very detailed drawings of fairy wrens. There's another note that reminds us on the inside of the back cover that says Mandy Foote took over 1,000 photos of fairy wrens building their nests, tending their eggs and caring for the chicks to ensure the real-life authenticity of the illustrations. They're absolutely fabulous. Now, we didn't actually, when we thought of an illustrator, think, we need an illustrator who has fairy wrens in their garden. But she had fairy wrens nearby, lives in the country, and, so it was fantastic. And apparently she used to draw the fairy wren a long time ago, at a time when she was drawing fairy wrens and so on. So it all came together. And a little plug for Mandy. She's the person who's done the illustrations on the Hague's special chocolate tins for Easter as well.
Oh, right.
And there were some Bilby tins done earlier in the year, and she's done the latest one. So she's fantastically talented. And,
nice work, Mandy.
Like me, she likes chocolates. Yeah. So sales should jump instantly.
I love that all that information is included in this book.
Yes.
I as a reader really value finding out more about the processes that have gone into books and where ideas or where that knowledge that's been put into the writing and the illustrating has been built and comes from. And I think as teachers, it's always wonderful to share that with students.
Yes.
Or if I'm a parent, sharing that with my child, that.
No, it's that background information, things that they can't know unless the author's talked about it and so on.
Yes.
Things that they'll have for stories that they've done, basically, that came because I did this and this happened, so I thought I'd write about it. Yeah. And there was, in as much as Mandy took lots of photos to see how she was going to do the illustrations and get the birds at different times, different positions, places, doing different things, we had to do some research on the fairy wren to sort of work out what we could include in the text. Yes. So, deep in the middle of a leafy bush, fairy wren was busy building her nest. She used grasses, spider webs, thin twigs, and small feathers. Piece by piece, hour by hour, she worked for several days. Then Fairy Wren sat silently, watching the world outside. Here she was hidden. Here she was safe. And here she laid her eggs. That's as far as I'm reading for now. Yes. But there are lots of things there that you can see. I didn't know exactly what she built the nest with. So Linda and I are sort of checking out, well, they do this, and then you can tell that there's a pace to it that's very different to the pace of the rhyming texts and the Monster Saw, which is a more upbeat thing. This is a quieter narrative, and you know that kids can do a similar thing with any animal you care to choose with how they set themselves up. And we discovered that the fairy wren makes their nest fairly low down inside the bushes, and they build a sort of if you think of something that's just an egg in its own right with a hole in the side, that's like their nest is. It's not the sort of semisphere where they sit inside the nest. It's different. So there's a picture that's drawn with the bird looking outside at a mum and one child there already as they're sort of waiting. So there's a human family in the background there. It just tags that notion of waiting for a baby to be born, waiting for the time when Junior arrives. But those are things we're experts on fairy wrens now.
Do you have any in your garden?
No, we don't. No. I don't think they're sort of drawn by the artificial grass.
Well, if they did, that's where your grass would be going, into fairy wren nests.
That's right. No, we do have some birds building nests at the front. Lily pillars, I think we've got out there. They sort of tend to get in the middle of those and so on. So So and there's always a bit of cleaning of the front fence as well, which is evidence of birds having been around. And then there are small things like, the length of the sentences, the piece by piece, hour by hour. Those are repetitions in as much as they repeat the form of the previous three words, piece by piece, hour by hour. And it happens again, the last bit I read to you, here she was hidden, here she was safe. And here, the word here is written 3 times. There are a lot of times when you're talking to students and you tell them not to repeat the same word that rapidly, but it works in different contexts. For effect, yes. It's deliberate repetition. People refer to it sometimes as the rule of 3. You know, here she was hidden, here she was safe. Doesn't have the emphasis or the feel that just adding that third here. And if you went on, here she was hidden, here she was safe, and here she laid her eggs, and here she could see so-and-so, 4 is too many.
Yes.
It just destroys it. So there's just 3 is a great option for those repetitive phrases.
Yeah, yeah. And something for young readers to notice, you know, that there is that repetition, to even name it, to say, wow, here is being repeated.
Yes.
And what effect that creates. Yeah. Mike, you used the word pacing before, which I think, you know, is a powerful word to be using with this. The 3 books that you shared so far all have different pace.
Yep.
Pace refers to...
Well, it's a bit like if you're writing a prose story about a chase, you don't want long sentences that just ramble on, because it's not a chase, it's a ramble. You know, he jumped through the door, he dashed down the lane, he did this, and you sort of get these quick sort of staccato effects of doing things very rapidly. You know, he ran to the door and went through and did something. As if you have too many, if the sentence is too long, it just doesn't go at that pace. And the shorter the sentence is, the quicker you can make changes. And you can suddenly change direction for people. If you spend 30 words on a sentence that's talk about him running down the street, he ran down the street past the this, that and the other, it's not going to work as quickly. He ran down the street, turned the corner, dashed into the lane, and suddenly he's gone 3 places in fewer words than you had in that 30-word long sentence about running down the street. So it allows you to do a lot more.
Oh, nice. Thank you for giving that example. I think that's because
I used it in another junior fiction book. So.
Good. We can look for that one as well. What book is that from?
Oh, that was one in a Jet series of books that Era did. Yeah. So I think, you know, and it's good to just, I love that you talked about that, because it does have to do with sentence. Yep.
And that sentence, you know, if we talk about traits of writing and sentence fluency and how we construct sentences, it isn't just about how we construct sentences. It is about pace of, length of.
Yes.
You know, do we do some longer sentence? Do we punctuate with short? Do we have a series of short sentences?
Yes.
Do we? And all of those things are the pieces that do create pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I often say to kids, writing is very difficult. You know, writers rewrite things endlessly. So Anissa's alphabet, I would have done close to. It's hard to find out where a draft starts and stops these days, but I would have done over 20 drafts of that, including a complete shift to having it as a prose story that didn't work, and I abandoned and then went to something else. And you know, you sort of have to try all these different things to get the thing that you finally want. And then certain rhyme schemes can trivialize things. If it's just too buoyant or frisky, the rhyme just works against the content.
Yes.
So you need something that's a slower rhyme.
Yeah.
And this Let the Singing Begin is in prose. So it hasn't got rhyming, because I think it could have trivialized it a bit. It was fine with the short, soft, understated sentences, but with some definite information. You already know the things they make their nest from, where they make their nests,
how long it takes.
Yeah, how long it takes, all those things very, very rapidly.
Yes.
But that's stuff we had to talk about and think about. Before we got to that version, there would have been some versions that I can't remember the details, but it could have been that here she was hidden, here she was safe. And you think it's flat. It's flat. But by the time you put the third one in and you make that the page that's there, and here she laid her eggs, it's a close of a chapter almost on the next. Yeah. A chapter doesn't have to be a chapter. It can just be an event that concludes on that page, particularly in a picture book, because the turn of the page takes you into the next action stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think whilst you talked about, that you might have done 20, say for a niece's alphabet, 20 versions of it, all the revision in each of those would account for
that was
thousands of
torturous.
Thousands of things. But I think for our young writers, knowing that we can be revising just one little bit.
Yep. Actually,
for impact.
Yeah. And the thing I was going to get to was that the writers make mistakes when they're writing. I had some kids. I did a young adolescent novel 20 years ago, and I had some kids reading it, some secondary kids, and they came up to me because I wanted. Sometimes I read it to them. I said, okay, at lunch, can I just read you? I've done a bit more of that book. They knew I was doing this book about schools, and some of it was based on incidents that had happened at the school they were at and some at previous schools. And I found that sometimes I had to read it out loud to them because if I gave it them and they handed it back to me, they were always very polite. They just, oh, that's wonderful, Mr. D. That's great. That's wonderful. But if I read it to them, adolescents are hopeless at covering their feelings. You can see when they're bored to a standstill straight away. Their eyes just flicker and don't pay attention. And you can see where they're interested because they actually lean forward and they you can see them waiting for the next word or the next sentence. So that was very good and very honest with them. But they would find mistakes. Oh, so you spelt the word here. I said. When we're writing, we call it a typo. It's not really an error or a mistake. It's just something you did quickly because you knew it. He said, well, we thought you knew that word. So. But that happens to students. So if you get your students to count one sentence, choose a medium sort of length sentence, count every word, every punctuation, every bit of punctuation that's there, and every space. And then you'll have a figure that comes up to 30. If you ask them to do it over a couple of sentences, you can get up to 100 very quickly. Then you can say to them, well, you've only read me 3 or 4 sentences. You've had 100 chances of making a mistake in those sentences you read to me. So what are the odds of you getting something in the wrong place or the wrong... Don't worry about it. We'll tidy that up next time. Yeah. And sometimes you read over it. And adult writers do that as well. I handed something to my wife to look at. And the word "the" was missing because whenever I read it, I got so used to reading it over. I sort of knew it was supposed to be there, and I read it. It was in the middle of a sentence. It wasn't at the start. And you look at it and you think, how on earth did I miss that? So you need a writing partner. You actually need your teacher who's a fresh set of eyes to look at these things.
Yes, yeah. All right, so shall we move on to the last of the big things that, well, the other one that hasn't yet made it
this is
fully fledged into the world.
Yeah, this is an April one as well. And this one is simply called Hair. And this is done by Lucinda Gifford, great illustrator again, different sort of style. She did the book Chicken Divas.
Oh, yes.
Which... won speech pathology or something like that.
I think that's
got one of the top gongs basically.
Yes.
A little while ago, and I'm delighted she's done this for Hair. So it's the text is simple, the illustrations are wonderful, and when you hear the text you can see what's there, and it sort of mentions different types of hair and contrasting hair and similar hair and so on. But she's put a series of animals into the illustrations who have similar hair sometimes. So it adds another whole visual layer. So you've got the written text and the visual text. And that's what's exciting for me when I do the writing. I love the picture books because you see the illustrations come together and you just see another layer of text added to the whole thing. And I've dedicated it to all of our grandchildren.
You all have different types of hair.
They all have different types of hair. I won't tell you which ones they've got, but they go through a few, and they'll probably go through a few more. I mean, it's not we had 3 boys, and they went through a lot of different hairstyles. They're old enough now to look back on them. So, whoa, look at that! Remember when you had dreadlocks or whatever? So, just read you a little bit here: blonde hair, black hair, red and brown, hair tied up or hanging down, hair with ribbons, bands and bows, bright tiaras, a coloured rose, hair in patterns, hair in patches, hair that's different, hair that matches, dreadlocks, mop tops, hair that's waved. Stop there.
Oh, cruel.
There are lots of different types of hair, and the picture I'm looking at has got dreadlocks, and it's got a girl with dreadlocks, and it's got a dog with dreadlocks as well. You know, they always say dogs look like their owners,
yes.
or owners look like their dogs.
Yes.
Well, this lot certainly do.
Well, funnily enough, we had our daughter send a photo of her with her dog the other day,
right.
and she said, matching hairstyles.
Oh, right.
So
yeah.
there exactly.
Well, it's got a lot. One stage is Emmy, my granddaughter, saw an advanced version of this on the screen when we were putting things together. And some crazy hair crops up a bit later on. There's rainbow hair. She loved the rainbow. She was into rainbows. Yes. Loved the rainbow hair. And for those who have to know, there's a mullet in there as well. Worry not.
A mullet's just an Australian thing, or is that universal?
I think people are aware of them. It's particularly Australian, I think. But I think people are aware of them because of the number of Australians that go overseas with mullets, you know. They sort of have a look at it, just check out that it's not Chewbacca to start with, and then, oh, that's an Australian with a mullet, you know. and you're there. So great illustrations, and this whole series of animals that have similar things. And something that I've never had in a book before, it's they call it a gatefold in the industry, but there's a page for hair that stands up higher and higher, and the page actually opens up for the higher hair. So that has its own. So it's a lovely
landscape format.
Yes.
And this, the higher and higher fold, takes it right up.
Goes up.
Beautiful.
And, beautifully done. Exquisite. Lovely bright colours and so on.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fun book. It's a book that you could base an activity in school around, or a competition of kids who come, because the number of kids on those what's that race they do? The colour day.
Colour run.
Yeah, colour run. Yeah, right.
Yes.
And then it's easy to get stuff to colour your hair and so on these days. There are even some older pictures. My hair is I won't say silver fox, but it's just a bit grey and flatter these days. But I had an afro for a long time when I had, strong curly hair that would stay up and stand up and things like that. And there are even some you can't get photos off the web. Who's that?
It's a permanent.
Yeah. So I think we all experiment with hair, and I think I could get some photos of my wife at different stages in life with different sort of experiments with hair and stuff.
Yes. So, I think we're all there, Mike. We're all there with our. Once we get to an age where different decades have got different,
that's right.
The different style.
It's the big hair time. They date things, don't they? My mother used to say, if you worry about the world not having made progress, go and have a look at an old movie and see the people and the things that are there and the things they do. And we, in amongst all the complications and the challenges, we've actually made a lot of progress.
Yes.
So I think this is a fun time. You could even make it a theme book for a party or something like that.
Yes, you could. I'm liking how this is all running into where we could go with this from an entertainment perspective.
That's
There's plenty there to work with.
That's right.
But as I think we might have said before we began the podcast, it's also a book that isn't just about hair. If we said, what is this a story about? there's lots of things to take from this story, not just about the different hairstyles, which I think is something that for each of these books that you've brought today, when we ask that question about what is this book about, we all will have varying insights into what this means to us in terms of what is this story saying to us? What is this a story of? Yeah.
Well, there's issues to do with personality, issues to do with choices, issues to do with experimenting at certain times. Issues to do with certain ages, issues to do with not judging books by the cover or people by the hair. Stuff like that, which can happen from time to time, and just the playfulness of it as well. So it's I think it includes everybody.
Yes. And, without a doubt.
You'll find yourself in this one.
And if not, we'll write to you and we'll let you know.
That's right. Yeah.
That our representation hasn't yet been made, but I think you've got it covered.
You missed me here. So once again, thanks to Lucinda for all the drawings. They're great. Just jump off the page with the humour. Different books don't need it, but this one needed someone who can just draw out humour in the illustrations.
Yes.
There are little things that she's done. Well, not just little things, big things, really, from start to finish that just draw out that humour.
But interestingly, for all of the books, every writer, every illustrator, there's still research.
Yes.
It's still, because at the end of the day, the things that we are writing about are either things for any of us, things that we know about or things that we've learnt about that we can now write with more insight into it. I suppose I'm sort of going back to the ideas thing again too. Sometimes we don't know a lot about it. The Blue Wren book, I think that's such a good example of saying we can find out about more things to be able to write. We don't have to know everything about something to be able to come to an understanding about something and to share that.
And if you write something for a younger audience, sometimes that helps you. All that stuff to do with summarising, you've actually got to choose your most important information. We couldn't sort of go on endlessly about the things they use and exactly how long they take. That sort of deadens the information. It makes it a non-fiction book rather than a narrative book that's got an emotional connection to it. So you've got to choose which are the bits that are going to give us a sense of all of that. How many things are you going to think are going to be included? Do you need to say what the twigs are from? The twigs from this tree or that tree? No, it's too much. So you've just got to get the essential bits of information there to put in your story because you're writing it for a younger audience. So you get all those choices. I mean, writing picture books is something that kids in secondary school do, offer their SACE and things like that. And that's a choice they have to make because they've moved further away from that audience, but then have to bring themselves back to it as authors and say to themselves, we need to make some choices and decisions here. Otherwise, it just doesn't work for that target audience.
So. Well, Mike, I think it's just so powerful for us as teachers to be able to have the author talk us through the processes and decision-making and choices that they've made about the very books that they've created so that some of those insights can be brought to our own students because we can share some of that information too. I think it's... without knowing those things, we can't always notice those things as well. And so I think that's just incredibly valuable for us as teachers and for us as teachers of students, but just for us in our own understanding about how writing works too.
Right. Yeah. For me, it was a journey I took while I was a teacher because I was I taught for a long time, hadn't been published, and then I'd get published. And first thing I did was go back to school and we instituted a system of all kids making books. Because I thought, well, I feel pretty good about this, with your name on the cover and whatever. And one of the things I just perhaps finish with this is if you get the kids to write a short biography. And the reason for that was I was found out when my first book came out and the editor, they said, send some notes or biographical notes or something. And I sent them something. They said, oh, thanks for the notes. But, and as a teacher, you know that phrase means, well done, thank you very much, but no.
No.
You use it with kids. Oh, this is great. Tell them something positive. This was wonderful. No, it wasn't. This was wonderful, but here we go. Here comes the bad news. And they said, well, next time you write it, could you write it in the third person? And I said, why is that? Could you tell me why that is? They said, so it looks as though we wrote it because it saves us time and money. I thought, right, okay, we're in business now. There's a business side to books. But I did write it in the third person and sent them some stuff. Or ever since then, I've done it in the third person. But I went straight back into school. And for these books that these kids were doing, we all got them to write a biography. And they enjoyed doing that. And one of the kids discovered something that I hadn't realized at the time. They're writing their bio, and they used to keep it with them to put with all their writing. And they'd revise it from year to year because they'd gone off, one direction, and they're on Harry Styles now, and all the others were hopeless and whatever. They have those changes, and they want to take that out and put something else in. But they just update, like I do as a writer. I just give an updated bio. But one of the kids say, "Hey, Mr. D," he said, "do you know what you can do with this?" I said, "You tell me." And he said, "You can say great things about yourself, and it doesn't sound like bragging. It sounds like somebody else wrote it." I said, "You're right, actually. Hang on, what have you put?" He said, "I put he's a great sportsman." So we stopped the class, and I said it was terrific. And I said, "Go on, say what you've just done, because other people can do that." And he said, "Oh, I can brag about myself without bragging,
Yes.
And so that's a neat little thing that they can do. So, and that gives them that sort of sense of being a writer and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. So it's good.
That's such a great. I'm glad we got that in because out of all of this, we want students to be able to engage with these books, and to be able to see how they can be a writer too.
Yep.
How they can see themselves in this process of being a writer. Being a reader, being a writer, being the thinker, being the creator.
Yep.
Because it's all wrapped up in a lot of processes, and being able to brag. Sometimes I think that just gives kids a whole lot of confidence about themselves as, just saying.
I went back and started bragging on mine.
Well, thank you so much for today, Mike. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We've loved to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You'll receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events, and ways to contact us. Thank you, Mike. Been an absolute pleasure and an absolute journey of interest, as it always is. All of those insights.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, and we thank all of our listeners. Best to you, Mike, and best to listeners as well. Thanks, everyone. Till next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.